I'm Kirk Harnack. On This Week in Radio Tech, it's Tom Ray, Chris Tobin, and Chris Tarr. And we're talking engineering from the trenches and the foxholes. It's a War Stories episode up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiRT.
Bandwidth for This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This Week in Radio Tech, Episode 80, recorded April 27, 2011. War Stories. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Telos Systems, on the web at telos-systems.com. It's time for This Week in Radio Tech. Hello there, I'm Kirk Harnack, and very glad that you're along with us. You've tuned into a dangerous program. It's a program where propeller-headed geeky engineers talk about, engineering stuff. And if you're interested in that, well, we welcome you in. I'm glad you're here. I want to introduce my partners in crime. First of all, from the Hudson Valley of New York, it's the Chief Engineer for WOR and VP of Engineering for Buckley Broadcasting, Mr. Tom Ray. Hi, Tom.
Kirk, you didn't tell me you wanted the propeller hats. I would have got mine. Anyway, and I just thought that tonight, in honor of my hero, Donald Trump, and he's my hero because of the hair he wears, because I can't wear that kind of hair.
He's not your hero, he's your hero.
There you go. But I thought, since Obama showed me his, I'm going to show you mine. See, what? I was born. I was not hatched. There it is, certificate of birth. And look, There's a seal up here. See, the seal of the city of Hartford, Connecticut.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, Tom, I'm glad you're with us. You're actually in fine company because I also brought, for the show, I brought my birth certificate.
All right.
Yeah. St. Louis, Missouri.
So we have two of us who are official now.
Two of us are.
That's good. Yeah.
Are we qualified to be president?
We're qualified to be president, and we're qualified to be on this show. Even better.
Okay. That's more necessary right now. Hey, let's move along and see who else is with us. How about Chris Tobin, the best-dressed engineer in radio from Manhattan, New York. Hey, Chris.
Hello. I don't have my documents with me. I was advised by counsel I should just stick with the visual. So for those of you listening only, there's nothing to worry about. You're not missing a thing on the visual side. Other than that, the president here is in town today, this evening, doing some fundraising. So it's actually fun. He and I share the same birth date, so it's I don't need to produce anything.
Awesome.
Again, maybe Donald Trump should call me, and then I'll say, okay, fine, I'll show you.
Wait, do you share the same birth day of the year or the same date of birth?
Everything.
Really?
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I suppose we should bow to Mr. Tobin, then.
No.
Wow.
No, that's quite
because he's really official.
A lot of people born on the same day, but it'd be interesting to compare timelines of Mr. Tobin's career and President Obama's career. That could be interesting.
Well, yeah, I did not become the president of the Harvard Law School or anything like that, or the law club, so I didn't follow that track. But yeah,
I'm glad you're here. Yeah,
but he's a great organizer of electrons, so we're all set.
Yes, there you go.
I called you guys together, and you showed up, and President Obama did not. So there you go.
He turned down your invitation.
Let's turn the camera out to Mukwonago, Wisconsin, and say hi to Chris Tarr. Hello, Chris.
Hello there. The birthing unit on the planet that I come from does not issue certificates, so I can't help you there. The other thing is I had my beanie, but on orders of the FAA, the last time I put it on there, because I am an engineer and I modified it, the FAA no longer allows me to wear my beanie with the propeller on it.
All right. Well, we're off to a rather auspicious start here. Oh, by the way, Chris, you're qualified to be here because you do engineering for some interesting radio stations. Demanding radio
I do.
stations.
I am the director of engineering for Intercom's radio stations in Madison and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There are 5 FMs and 1 AM.
And you do IT work, too, I think.
I do IT work, absolutely. I do everything. Right. I mop the floors. I unplug the toilets.
Isn't that so typical for engineers? Something goes wrong around it. Hey, this handle's broken on this door. Call Chris over here. He'll fix it.
You unplug the toilets? Do you have electric toilets in the place?
Yeah, I do actually. They're very high powered.
Oh, good. Well, good. Then we're all set. Hey, Kirk, you said we were going to talk about engineering stuff. Now, the note you sent out before said we were going to talk about the royal wedding. I'm disappointed.
Actually, we need to have an episode where we talk about the things that we've been asked to do that have nothing to do with electrons.
Cool.
That's
very cool.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
A friend of mine was tasked with driving the station van delivering flowers 3 days a week. That doesn't seem right. I don't think he had the appreciation of the management. Hey, well, welcome into the show. I want to mention that the show is being brought to you by my friends at Telos. Also happens to be my employer, but they approached me about sponsoring the show, and I said, yes, thank you very much. Cool. So we'll tell you about Telos a little bit later on in the show. So thanks a lot. Hey, we're going to get right into the war stories in a minute. There are a couple of topicals to topical about, and we're going to hit a couple of them here real quick. You know that all this talk in Congress and the brouhaha and the kerfuffle over funding public radio. Well, it's official on one front, and that is the PTFP. That is the Public Telecommunications Facility Program, and that's a function of the NTIA. What does the NTIA stand for? The National Telecommunications. What? I forget. Anybody know?
Industry Association. I don't know.
NTIA. The NTIA's Public Telecommunications Facility Program is dead. I should know. I'm sorry, I don't. Maybe the chat room will tell us. But anyway,
Administration.
Information Administration. Yes, I knew it was a government function. Well, anyway, they're not funded. You know, they funded about $20.5 million in 2011. Now, this is a program where radio and I think TV stations too apply for grants, PTFP grants, so they can buy new equipment. And maybe there's other things they can buy too. But hey, the company I work for, Telos, typically would get some business from radio stations being granted their grant money from PTFP and then being able to spend it on various infrastructure upgrades, you know, consoles, audio processors, hybrids, and talk show systems. You know, a fair amount of business. That's been defunded. What you guys are all not in public radio, you're in commercial radio, but do you know much about this program and how it's going to affect our friends in public radio?
I would guess, Kirk, that it would affect them greatly. Yeah, especially the smaller stations, you know, not someplace like New York City or Boston or, you know, Los Angeles or Chicago or places like that. But I would think that in much smaller areas. I mean, I have a friend who's chief engineer of a fairly sizable public station, but it's in a very small market, and they rely heavily on grants and on their fund drives. Without that grant, I mean, they really have no other way to make up that shortfall.
Interesting. Well, I don't know how, you know, public stations. A lot of them are resourceful, and they'll find other ways to get some funding. But I know this is a blow to the radio stations, and it's a little bit of a cut to equipment manufacturers like my employer, who look forward to some orders every year from PTFP grants. I want to move on to a different subject real quick here and talk about this automation litigation. It's threatening broadcasters. The story from Radio World Online, rwonline.com. Broadcasters are preparing for a legal battle over automation technology that's become the backbone, obviously, of on-air operations at many U.S. stations, probably just about all of them. At least, you know, not just automatic automation, but just playing back commercials and spots from a computer. A company called Mission Abstract Data, LLC, they're doing business as Digimedia. Well, they filed a complaint in the U.S. District Court for the District of Delaware alleging patent infringement by various broadcast groups, including CBS Radio, Beasley Broadcasting, Cox Radio, Greater Media, Cumulus, Town Square Media, and Entercom. I noticed my company, Delta Radio, wasn't named, but we don't have any pockets. In all, nearly 900 radio stations are directly involved. The plaintiff claims that it holds patents for using an all-digital computer hard drive-based system for music storage and playback for broadcast. That's pretty wide, isn't it?
Well, it's pretty.
Most patents are these days.
But if you take a look, Kirk, it's real interesting that the patent was applied for, I think, in either 94 or 95, and I mean, for our station in Hartford had a computer-based automation system on the air in 1989. Yeah. So how can you patent something that's already working?
Pre-existing artwork, it's known as.
Yeah, well, that and I also met a guy once at a smaller station who was a bit ahead of his time. He had a Unix-based system that he built. I mean, it was literally breadboarded. It was this room I'm sitting in here is about 10 by 12. It took up a 10 by 12 room with, I mean, we're talking, you know, hard drives this big. You know, he built this in the early 1980s. So, I mean, digital automation's been around for a while. And why would you go after the stations? And how could the station be held liable? At least this is how I think. How could the station be held liable if they bought it from a valid company?
And that's that was my question. All of this when I heard that is you know the broadcast stations bought the technology from other people. We didn't build it. We didn't make it. We didn't create it. We're just consumers. It's just I would think it'd be akin of if somebody. Sued somebody over a DVD player, over the patent, and decided to sue everybody who's ever bought a DVD player for using it and try to get money from them. That part of it, I don't pretend to be a legal scholar at all, so there's probably something there that I'm missing, but that seems odd to me.
Well, I'll continue with what Radio World is reporting. They've confirmed that at least some broadcasters have been contacted by parties representing Mission Abstract Data, asking them to sign licensing agreements. Though the complaint goes after broadcasters rather than the manufacturers, suppliers are involved. Several sources confirmed that at least one telephone conference call between some defendants and automation vendors reviewing a possible defense strategy has taken place. And I either got an email or saw a Twitter or maybe something on Facebook. Yeah, so many media choices nowadays on my computer screen. But saying, hey, did you work for Scott Studios prior to such and so a date? Or did you work for this other company prior to such and so a date? If you would you, please write back with recollection of what you did and what we were making at the time? So, yeah, the art existed beforehand. When Tom, you mentioned you guys were using automation in '89. Was that a Smarts brand system? Do you remember? Was it something else?
It sure was. It was a small Smarts brand system. It was only in the AM studio. The only reason, the reason we bought it, we were going towards more satellite-based programming on the AM at the time, and it was a heck of a lot better to do it that way than to load cart machines.
Was it hard drive? Because the complaint here, at least Radio World quotes it as being hard drive based. Was it cassette based, perchance, or was it?
No. It had a hard drive.
Okay, and did it have audio on the hard drive?
Oh, yes, it had audio files on the hard drive. The hard drive also ran it was DOS. It ran the program itself. The program would load, and all the audio was stored on the hard drive.
Yeah. So back in 1992, I was using, I don't remember now what company made it, but is it System Sentry? I seem to remember it actually was kind of a hybrid that not only controlled tape and cart-based automation, but also you could store audio on its hard drive as well. I seem to recall playing with that machine too back then.
Speaking of, I want to touch for just a second on some of these hybrid systems from back in the late 80s. Do you remember an automation system based on a Commodore 64 that would run modified cassette decks that had reflective tape or their oxide scraped off between songs or between cuts? And this automation didn't have a hard drive. It was run on a Commodore 64. I guess you'd load it with a cassette player, load the program in, and then it would control cassette decks. Anybody remember that?
Really? I heard about it, but I did not use one.
Okay, that's a bad dream I had about it, maybe. And then of course there were automation systems for several years back when hard drive technology was still too expensive to really put a lot of songs on. You had hard drives that would you had a computer automation system that would run various different CD jukeboxes, like a popular one from Sony and a couple others as well. So they would
the Arrakis Digilink system did that, used 6 CD changers. But, one of the things, it's funny you bring that up, one of the things I remember from those systems, especially with the Digilink and I think Digital DJ was another one that played, mostly used for satellite programming, where you'd have satellite music and then the local drop-ins were played off the hard drive, is that the hard drives at the time were so small that they used really aggressive data compression. So what you'd hear is there'd be this really bad audible difference between the local content and the satellite content. So, you'd have, the song fading in crystal clear stereo, then you'd have the local ID. Your local station here playing the greatest music of all time, as the satellite DJ would do.
Yeah.
And then they stop talking and they go to the local commercials and be like, and we'll be back with more music after this. Stop by Joe's in downtown. Yeah.
Well, back then, I think, what you're primarily referring to is the early sound cards were only 8 bits of bit depth. So, the signal noise was just awful. And then the sample rate was a lot less. They were typically sampling at either 11 kilohertz or 15 or 22 kilohertz to give you 11 kilohertz of bandwidth. But yeah, that was, I think, mostly a function of the sound card. You said the data reduction, back then they didn't have or didn't implement sophisticated data reduction like MPEG-2. They typically just used some form of ADPCM, adaptive delta pulse code modulation. So instead of coding every sample on an 8-bit basis, they would code the first sample and then code the delta to the next sample and the delta to the next sample and the delta to the next sample. And I don't know if you ever had, like in video, we have this notion of keyframes where ever so many frames or ever so many seconds will write the whole screen again to and then after that we'll just write the delta of what's going on the screen with various algorithms involved. But then finally somebody came along with MPEG and aptX also compression on the sound card. Sound cards were expensive, the hard drives were expensive, but we could store audio with with better quality on those things. And back to this, the first station that I owned in Cleveland, Mississippi, we had a hybrid automation system where it would run CD players, and the commercials and jingles would come off of a 360 Systems. What was it called? Was it called a DigiCart? It used some kind of a Bernoulli disc.
That was DigiCart. Yeah, DigiCart.
Yeah. Okay. So it didn't have it had a hard drive, but the hard drive was just big enough to run the computer. I want to say that might have been a Computer Concepts system.
That might be right. That might be right. I'm trying to remember now. But yeah, that was Bernoulli optical disc.
Yeah. Hey, in fact, boy, this is bringing back memories. I remember I made a trip to visit the folks at Arrakis because at the time, as a contract engineer, I worked for a lot of stations that had very little budget, and they had an automation system that was fairly simple. And if you programmed it and left it alone, it worked pretty well. This was some early Arrakis Digilinks, and I remember meeting with them and asking them, "Hey, when can we actually put music on the hard drive? When can we have a hard drive big enough that it'll hold music?" And whatever year I visited them, they were like, "Oh, real soon, that's coming. You're gonna be excited about that. Not just the commercials, but you're gonna be able to put the songs on the hard drive."
Oh man, the one thing I remember about the Digilink system, and I had one at a station I was a program director of, was because of the limited functionality, because you only had like 6 CD changers with each one would hold 6 CDs, where you kind of had to rotate these things in and out on a daily basis. So there were some songs that we'd only hear on Tuesdays because that was the day that CD went into the changer. So
yes. and then you had this problem, if you actually cared about doing it right, you had this problem of you had to take your music scheduling program and it had to be aware of what packs of CDs were in the changers on that day, so it would schedule the right CDs. Now, okay, that's pretty bad, okay? But then we moved on to a problem that wasn't quite as bad. At my station, and a lot of stations had 3 of those Sony CD changers. They held, I think, 60 CDs, and they were serially controlled and had consumer level outputs on the back of them, and typically we'd bump that up to professional level balance. But your music scheduling program had to be aware of it couldn't play 2 songs back to back from the same CD changer. So that when it was scheduling songs, and that's a whole science into itself. We ought to do a show about that subject because that's pretty interesting. The whole science of song scheduling. So you don't get Celine Dion back to back. I mean, you lose all your listeners that way, right? And so, did you guys catch that? Anyway. There's all kinds of tests that it'll pick a song and say, okay, did I play the same artist last hour? Am I going to play this artist the next hour? Did I play this artist at the same time yesterday? Is this a female artist, and do I really want to play it back to back with another female artist? Because sometimes some program directors and music directors think that's a bad idea. Is this an oldie song, and did I just play an oldie song? So it has all these tests it goes through, and one of them had to be, is this song even available to play right after the song I'm playing right now? And
you know,
then,
the other fallback. Well, the other fallback to that is if you put the wrong cartridge in, you have the wrong set of CDs in there, it would think the music system would think that CD was in there and go to play it, and you'd either get a song that would play halfway through and fade because the song that was supposed to be there was shorter, or it'd play a track and a half and then fade because the automation system had no way to tell for sure that you actually had the right one in there.
Right. Oh my goodness, the problems that we used to have. It's relatively easy nowadays, isn't it? All the songs are available. Anything can be scheduled back to back that you want to. They're all on hard drive, and most of us have them backed up somewhere. So, oh gee, the trouble that we used to go to just to have nobody in the control room seems like a lot of trouble. So when did we start using the first full up automation systems that really had music on hard drive without any huge compromises?
That's probably the early 90s. When you could get a hard drive that was pretty much big enough, and you had computers where you could actually have various drives.
Yeah, because I remember even back in the days of DCS from Computer Concepts, you could buy. They sold RAID arrays that you could have multiple drives in a cage, and with their aptX encoding and stuff, you could fit a decent amount of audio on those hard drives. And DCS has been around forever. So yeah, I agree with Tom. I think as early as 92 or 93, I saw systems playing back music off hard drive.
Yeah, definitely.
I went to work for Scott Studios in 96. Yeah, I think it was 96, might have been 95. And at that time, they had music on hard drive, but it hadn't been around that long at Scott Studios. Just 2 years, maybe 3 years prior, they were advertising an interesting concept. They thought it was interesting, where they would take your song from CD and move the data from the CD to a local hard drive. With about an hour's worth of music on the local hard drive, and then play it back from the local hard drive. But it was, stored. It was stored ephemerally locally, and on CD, back in the server room, like just in time delivery. I don't know. That didn't last long.
I was going to say, that sounds really complicated.
I thought it was very complicated, but when the biggest hard drive you can buy, is what a gig, then what do you do? In fact, it may be less than that.
10 or 20 meg.
Yeah, this was after the 1020 meg days, because I bought 40 meg hard drives for my first real computer. And when I went to work for Scott Studios, they were just selling 9 gig hard drives, and you could fit all your library on 9 gigs.
And do you remember what those cost? They cost a fortune. Oh my!
We charged $1,000 for them. But
yep,
yeah. Wow. Hey, let's move on in the topical news. Let's see. Somebody's made an example here. CBS Communication Services. Is getting fined $1,000 for the tower light problem. The FCC says an employee of its Los Angeles office saw the top beacon of their tower at West 190th Street and Prairie Avenue was unlit at 11:20 p.m. They contacted the FAA to determine if the outage had been reported. It had not been, and the FCC then requested that the FAA issue a NOTAM, a notice to airmen, and then the top beacon was also off the next night. So let's see, the tower was being used by or is owned by KNX in Los Angeles, and the right stuff wasn't on the logs. $10,000 for your tower light off. How serious is your tower light off and not telling the FAA about it?
Well, in the case of WR, it'd be real serious because we're in the flight path for Newark International. We're about 4.5 miles out of there, and we're just off to the side of Teterboro. And 2.5 miles from there, so it's pretty serious. I mean, the aircraft going into Newark dropped their landing gear over the WR building, and we hate it when that happens because it puts a hole in the roof. Anyway,
I was just gonna say, there's got to be something to add to that. You did, thank you, Mr. Tar.
Well, I mean, there's never an excuse for that. I mean, and we're all, although we are all human and that happens, but it's kind of frustrating when I hear something like this. Is generally radio stations broadcast stations are the ones who are really, really compliant with tower stuff. Now, I hear a story about that. Yet I remember, I believe it was last summer, the summer before, I was in Iowa driving up the interstate. I think it was I-35 or something, and I literally counted 7 or 8 cell towers that had various lights out, either beacons or side markers, or and I'd go back the next night and the next night and the next night while I was on vacation over there. And I mean, it's a very common thing. I think I see a lot of with cell towers, especially where the lighting is broken or non-functional or just not right. And you see a story like this, and it just kind of kills you, because it's we historically have a very good record of being on top of tower lights. But it's something you need to do, and in these days of automation and that sort of thing, it is something it can be pretty easily forgotten about.
You bring up a good point, Mr. Tarr, and that is that I've traveled through, when I used to live in Mississippi and take care of some radio stations there, I spent a lot of time traveling through Mississippi and Arkansas and West Tennessee. And one night I had the drive, or one day I had evening I had the drive from the Little Rock Airport back to my home in Mississippi. And I counted 12 cell towers with their lights operating improperly. And in every case, it was day mode at night. So you had these strobe lights operating and if you know what you're looking at, day mode is not hard to figure out. And these towers were all 12 of these were in day mode at night. That is freaking blinding. If you're a pilot, first of all, you don't want to see that. It's bright. And second of all, its day mode is one burst of light. Your eye can't fix on where the tower is if it can't see the vertical structure of the tower, and it can't at night because it's dark. Now, at night, night mode is usually a burst of flashes, so your eye has time to go lock on to where this light is. So if you ever experience that, you know how weird, disconcerting, unhelpful it is to have, a tower in day mode at night. And then there were other towers where I know the top red light was off if it was a red lighted tower and the obstruction lights were on. And, this goes on for months and months and months. Now, here's what I'm getting to. My question is, if I don't know if anybody here would know the answer, what are the requirements for tower light checking and reporting for tower owners other than broadcasters? Is it the same as broadcasters? Is a cell tower owner required to check the tower lights and report them out? No. Well,
no, it's the same, and they have the same. They should have the same monitoring equipment. And I know ATC, when they bought one of our towers, they installed their own monitoring equipment. But it's the exact same rules we have to follow. It's 30 minutes after dusk. Every day, tower lights have to be checked, and upon a failure, I don't remember what the time frame is. One of you guys probably remember better than I do, but the time frame for reporting an actual outage for a NOTAM. Not sure what that is yet.
It's 30 it's 30 minutes after you notice that the light is out. So if you're automated and you have you're supposed to have some type of a system that alerts you somehow, whether that means it calls out and gets a hold of somebody to say, hey, we got a problem here, if a tower light is out, or if it sends you an email, however it does, it's supposed to alert somebody to check, and then that person has to pick up the phone and make the phone call. In the case of a station like WOR that's sitting there and is manned 24/7, my guys check. They actually log readings every 3 hours, but every half hour they take a look, and if they see a tower light out, bang, they call me. I can determine, if it's a beacon or whatever, and then we pick up the phone and we make a phone call. And my system's kind of, our towers are right behind our building here. So they'll, not only do they manually check, but I also have the remote control system. I have a fairly new lighting controller that not only, will alert me the minute there's a problem with any of the lights, but also it has to actively be pulled. So if for any reason, even the remote control can't talk to the controller, I'm alerted right away. So, it's one of those cases, too, where, if the power goes out or, any number of situations, if there's not a positive response from the controller, I immediately get a call that there's a problem.
Now, I think there's a lot of Oh, I won't say misinformation. There's a lot of different information that different people have about how often you have to check tower lights. Phil in the chat room says, you need to check the lights and log every 30 minutes, report a failure detected. Well, no, that's actually not the rule. My understanding of the rule, and I read it over several times back when I was contract engineering for people, was that you had to check the proper operation of the lights once every 24 hours. Now, this does open up a bit of a loophole. What if the towers don't come on at dusk and you check them every morning at 3 a.m.? Your overnight guy checks them at 3 a.m. and they work at 3 a.m. but they're never working in the evening for some reason when they should be. That could be a problem. But I recall specifically that it's only required to actually check them once every 24 hours, and I don't recall ever having a requirement that they alert you automatically if they're not on when they should be on.
No, if you're operating with an automated system, you have to have some way that the system alerts you if they're off when they're supposed to be on.
What is an automated system? You mean if there's nobody there, or
if there's nobody there, if the site is operating unattended? Okay. In other words, there is nobody sitting there who has the site under control. The site has to alert somebody that the tower lights are out when they're supposed to be on.
Interesting. Okay. Well, anyhow, I can tell you there's plenty of towers across this country that are owned by counties, cities, emergency management agencies, cellular tower companies that aren't getting properly monitored, and broadcasters seem to take the brunt of this. The inspectors are there anyway. Hey, does the FCC inspect cell tower sites for proper licensure for other things that the cell tower site may have to have? I don't know.
My understanding is that they do, but unless somebody calls, they probably don't go out. Yeah. Cell sites are everywhere.
I'm not going to sit here and whine, but they do seem to check broadcasters. Now, one thing that I think is positive is there are plenty of cell sites and other sites that are multiple use that are owned by some big companies that I think at least they're in a position to do a better job of monitoring, like companies like Crown Castle or I think Chris Tarr, you mentioned ATC, right?
Yeah, they do an excellent job. And here's one thing to remember too, as we're talking about inspecting of cell towers, and broadcasters tend to get picked on a little bit, but one of the things that they're doing now, that the FCC is doing, is they're deputizing people like secretaries and office workers to come take a look at public files. And a lot of times what you find there is if their public file's good, you don't hear from them again for a while. If things look kind of messy and your station logs, your public files aren't in order, then you'll get the field inspector visit. But the FCC is so understaffed now that they kind of have to pick their battles. What's more likely? Where are the problems and the dangers more likely? On a short little cell tower or on a 500-foot broadcast tower? And I think that's why it seems like we're kind of unfairly targeted, but it makes a little sense if you look at kind of the risk factors there.
Speaking of targeting, one of the attractive things about red flashing tower lights, if you are drunk and have a gun, is it's pretty instant satisfaction to know that you've hit it successfully. I'm not saying I've ever done this. I'm just trying to get into the mind of people. When the tower climber climbs the tower and says, "We found 3 bullet holes in your coax in the vicinity of the beacon, and the beacon has got 2 bullet holes in it."
I want to mention real quick, somebody in the chat room just mentioned that tower lighting is an FAA requirement, not an FCC. That's actually wrong. It is an FCC requirement as well. In fact, it'll say on your license that the structure must be marked and lit per the FAA requirements. And if it's not, that's also an FCC violation.
And Kirk, those lights are also a lot of fun to remove from their sockets and drop down a 275-foot tower along with the lenses in the lighting fixture. I've had that happen at a station where we had an apartment out back. They had a kegger over the weekend, and we came in. We came in Monday morning. It's like, where the hell are the tower lights?
Jeez. I mean, people at the kegger climb the tower, and
yeah, they all 5 towers. There wasn't one bulb in them.
Oh, gee. Now, I don't know if you guys have done any tower climbing. I used to do some tower climbing, and I'll tell you, one of the real interesting, I'm going to say a joy of doing that kind of work is I used to change the beacons and the side lights on a station in near Memphis, Tennessee. And late in the afternoon, you climb in this tower, and I think this tower was about 400 feet tall. and I'd get to the top of the tower and latch on, be all secure, and open that beacon, and the tall beacon, the 300 millimeter code beacons, have a hinge in the middle. You undo a screw thing, and you pull the whole thing open. You're at the top of the tower. There's nothing above you to grab onto. You are at the top, and so you've got a couple of fresh light bulbs, probably in a sack that's tied to your belt behind you, so you don't ever crush it up against the tower while you're climbing. And so you're going to take the old beacon out, right? So you reach in, and they're a bayonet mount. You push them down slightly, you turn it counterclockwise 90 degrees, and then the beacon comes out. And these things are kind of big. They're a 620 watt bulb is almost a foot long, and What's cool is you figure out which way the wind's blowing, because you don't want to throw it into the wind and have it come back and hit the tower. I don't want to carry this beacon down, so it's fun to throw anyway. So you just toss it over the side in the direction that the wind's blowing, and watch it go down. And from 400 feet, these things actually seem to take a while to hit the ground. It's just so funny to watch the thing go, and finally hit the grass. 9 times out of 10, it wouldn't break. If it would break, from 400 feet away, you just hear a like that. It's all you'd hear. But usually they hit the grass, they wouldn't break. You climb down the tower, an hour later, and then there's the whole bulb. You bring it home to the wife. Hey, look at this. This is what I changed out today. It's a light bulb. That's actually kind of a real joy to put those things in. It's a real pain, though, to put the new one in and then climb down and find out that it doesn't work. So it's best to do it with a couple people on site. Somebody turn the power on while you're up there. Hey, we got to take a break real quick here. We're going to come back with actual, real, by golly, in the foxhole war stories. Our program today, this episode, is being brought to you by my friends at Telos. They're makers of the new Zephyr IP1, the Zip 1, as they call it. Bert, throw the picture up there, please, if you would. This is the Zip 1. It's now shipping from Telos. What is it? It's an IP codec. And this is a cute little box. It's under a couple grand list price, and I'm sure your dealer has it for some kind of discount. And it's full of different coding algorithms. It has the most sophisticated algorithms from Fraunhofer, AAC ELD. That's AAC Enhanced Low Delay. And this is a really terrific algorithm for going out and doing remote broadcasts. If you're plugging into somebody else's Ethernet, if you're using somebody else's Wi-Fi, the box, the Zip 1, does come with an approved Wi-Fi adapter, guaranteed to work with the box. In fact, every one of them is tested at Telos. They make sure that this Wi-Fi adapter works with this box, and so you can take it out, use it with Wi-Fi. You can take it out and use it with a cord. There's 3G and 4G. Some modems that do work. An approved list is coming out, but this thing's pretty amazing. In fact, I've got one. Let me see if I can show you here. Got one right here. There we go, right here on the Kirk Harnack desk. Oh, let's get the mic cable out of the way. And so we can hit the speed dial button a couple of times, and I just connected to the KGO studios in wherever KGO is. How about that? We'll disconnect, and I'm going to tune into another one that I've got here at the Harnack Ranch. So I'm playing a public radio station here. I've even got, somehow I can even dial into the WCBS studio. I wonder if Chris Tobin knows anything about this connection. I'm not sure it's on a port forward or not. It may take a few seconds to connect. But this is the Zip 1. It has AAC low delay, AAC ELD. Oh, sorry about that. Guess we're disagreeing on codecs. Go back to KGO. It connects right up there. Pretty cool.
When I'm on the track.
So it has these different codecs, including MP3, AAC, MPEG Layer 2, G.722 if you need that. It's also a SIP device, so you can call into it with a SIP phone. So it's a lot of cool applications there, and people around the world have been using these for actually a couple of years now, and the predecessor, the Zephyr IP. So the new Zip 1 costs less than the original Zephyr IP. It's got more features and I think more reliability. It's very, very cool. It's designed to negotiate and to deal with in real time changing internet connections. And in fact, here in my office, typically I have this connected up to a 4G modem, just to call around and see how well it's going to stay connected, typically for days and days at a time, even over a 4G connection. So check it out from your favorite Telos dealer, or better yet, go to the Telos website at telos-systems.com. And there you go. There's the front panel. You can find the Zephyr IP page right there. It's easy to find. A whole list of features and specs is right there on the Zip 1 page, and you'll see the connections for the front and the back. It does have 2 Ethernet connections on it. One of them is for your WAN connection. So that'd be for, going out to the internet. And the other one is for your LAN connection, so that if you have Axie equipment and you're LiveWire equipped, well, you can just plug it right in there. That's where your LiveWire comes in and out. If you don't have LiveWire, no problem. It still has analog inputs and outputs on the back. And coming later this summer, it'll also have AES digital connection on the back. Check it out. Zip 1 from Telos, shipping now. I got mine. Now we're back to This Week in Radio Tech. All right, gentlemen, let's make sure everybody knows who you are real quick. If you're just tuning in, Tom Ray from New York, the Hudson Valley. Howdy.
Greetings.
And Chris Tobin from Manhattan.
Hello, everyone.
And Chris Tarr from Mukwonago, Wisconsin.
Howdy.
So, guys, it's time to really hit up our war stories. And Chris Tarr, you seemed excited about telling us about something from the trenches, something that got you dirty and where you learned
it
something.
didn't really get me dirty. It's one of those where I'm just glad it wasn't one of my sites.
Okay.
I happened to see this transmitter site, and I looked at it and went, man, I could spend days fixing the problems that I found with this place. To protect the innocent, I won't say where it is. I won't make any mentions that would let you track this down. But the thing that kind of led me to go and see what was going on was, first thing I noticed was they had no left channel audio on the air. I was like, well, that's interesting. And the other thing I noticed is you saw the stereo pilot light, and it was blinking. It was just kind of flashing. And I'm thinking, okay, I mean, if this is what this sounds like on the air, what I'm seeing here, I got to see what this site looks like. So I drive up there, and I'm looking around and talking to another guy in the market who kind of knows the little history there. What it was they took, the building itself was a building that this person had bought from another transmitter site and had it shipped and set it just right on the rocks next to this tower. I guess he leased tower space that was co-located with a couple other things. So in the corner of this transmitter site plopped this building, just right on the gravel. And transmitters were inside. But the thing I noticed was a telco line coming out. It came out of the side of the building, up to the fence, and then ran along the outside of the fence line, and then off to the D-Mark. What I thought was interesting was the phone line was how they were getting their audio programming to the transmitter. So essentially they had a dial-up POTS connection because it was essentially simulcasting another station. And that's how they're getting. So anybody could have taken the station off the air in seconds by just clipping this wire that they had running along the fence line, along this fence line. So, looking at this big picture on how this all was put together, I said, well, these guys must be, it must be an old station, the deficiencies there. Oh, no, they put it in like a year or two ago, and it's just been like that ever since. I couldn't believe it. Looking at all these things that could possibly go wrong, water and rodents in the transmitter building, audio line, telephone lines coming out of the side of the building, running on the outside of the fence line, on the air, a channel missing and a stereo light flashing. And obviously whoever owned the station put $0 into it and really probably couldn't care less about about its operation. It was stunning to me how many problems this site had.
It either had $0 or obviously hired the wrong engineer to get the job done.
Well, I wondered about that, and I know most of the guys there, and I can't imagine that it was any of the guys I knew. The only thing I think of is I know a little bit of history about the area, and it was an allocation that the guy wanted at auction, and I think he was kind of battling just to keep his competitors out. So I think it was one of those situations where, he got it so no one else could get it, and then had to put something on as cheaply as possible. But it was stunning to me, the problems that I found at this site. And I'm thinking to myself, man, if I were an inspector, I can't imagine what I'd find, deficiency-wise in inside of the building with transmitters and licensing and things like that. And again, that kind of goes back to, if your job is taking care of a transmitter site, if I were an FCC inspector, the first thing I would be doing is going and paying these guys a visit, just based on what I saw, with the stereo light, what I heard on the air, and what I saw at this site. The first thing that strikes my mind is somebody doesn't care.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Did you figure out why the stereo light was blinking? Was there something wrong with the stereo generator? And was it even, they weren't trying to shove the composite through the POTS line, were they?
I actually, because again, it wasn't my station, so I didn't go in to do any work. It remains a mystery to this day. I was just more curious as to what, it was absolutely one of those things where I heard it on the air, and I saw this thing blinking, and I went, if this is the way the product sounds coming out of the radio, I've got to see where this is coming from, because I can only imagine what the place looks like. So I believe to this day, I think they've got 2 channels of audio now, but I still think to this day they have a flashing stereo light, and it could be, the method that they're using to encode their audio.
Wow. All right. Well, Mr. Tobin, you got any New York City stations like that?
Oh, I can't say that. No. Everybody here in town is good, even on the outskirts. When you're nearby like this.
We really didn't get to have a pre-show briefing or discussion, so I don't know what you've got for us, Mr. Tobin, but you said you had something for us, some kind of war story.
Oh, my war story, it's since we're in the city here, we don't have too many crazy transmitter stories I can go over. Since our transmitters are in the swamp, it's pretty much a given. Every time you go out there, you will be encountering something in nature, and you just got to be prepared. But no, this one is a classic. I think all of us have endured at some point in our remote broadcast career, outside broadcasting. Recently, St. Patrick's Day here in New York City, as you may know or may not know, St. Patrick's Day Parade is a very big event. It travels up Fifth Avenue, and which is in the center of Manhattan. And we do our broadcast literally at the front steps of the Cathedral of St. Patrick's on Fifth Avenue, and we broadcast our 2 news stations, do play-by-play, if you will, or man on the street. We talk to all those who visit. Yes, you can't really do a play-by-play for the parade. Wow, look at that! The bagpipes go by with nice colors. Actually, what we do is interview folks on the sidelines and find out more about what they're doing and what brings them by. So our setup begins usually at 9 a.m. Eastern, and we arrive on site around 7:30. We get everything together. It's myself and 2 other people, and getting things organized. We set up our ISDN codec. We set up a mixer. The usual fare. And about 8:30, I check in with the tech center again and make sure everything is still working. Sounds great. Audio is in great shape. Go back to setting up the microphones for the reporters to use. We had wireless mics, radio mics we're using for talking to folks on the sidewalk. And all of a sudden, I notice the IFB audio disappears. No Q audio from the studio. Well, that can't be good. Look at the ISDN codec. It says it's reconnecting. Like, okay, took a hit on the line. Think nothing of it. Then all of a sudden we notice the display says line down, and then line connected, line down. So essentially, what happened is we start losing our ISDN connection. Only about 20 minutes to go before air, and panic starts to set in. The on-site producer is panicking. So as a friend of mine always likes to say, you always have to have a plan B. You're out in the street, you have no control, you're at a remote site on location. You always have to have plan B. So out of the bag comes a laptop. I happen to have a piece of software for audio over IP. Turned it on, plug it in, had a USB mixer, plugged that in, took the output of our tabletop mixer, fed that in over a 3G connection, on a Verizon 3G connection, through a laptop. We did our entire 6-hour broadcast from the sidewalks on Fifth Avenue over a 3G connection while Verizon was feverishly trying to find out what happened to their underground trunking cables. Turns out that they lost several pairs.
And one of them was yours?
Yes. Oddly enough, it was that and 2 POTS lines that we normally have at the base of the lamppost that we broadcast from. So yeah, I was up until about 9:06 when the first break took place, there was panic and beads of sweat and everybody looking at each other and phone calls on cell phones trying to make something happen, and it worked out. It may not be that dramatic as flashing stereo lights and other things, or transmitter sites where animals have bored a hole in the building and decided to grow a family, but it was definitely something to be had. It was only by 9:45, 10 o'clock, we were interviewing the Archbishop, the Cardinal, and many other dignitaries. So, not to put pressure on anything.
I think a good lesson there is, hey, if you need the broadcast to happen, have a plan B and have an engineer there to implement it.
Oh, yes, without a doubt. We do so many outside broadcasts every day, and Tom knows because his radio station, with his format, talk format, we're constantly out and about, and I've got reporters in the field every day. Plan B and Plan C is something we literally do as a matter of course. It's just second nature for us. And any event we do, whether it be large or small, there's always a Plan B. Matter of fact, today, the LTE network for Verizon, their version of 4G, went down nationwide.
Oh, what? Really?
Yeah. So if you had an LTE phone, say like the Thunderbolt, as I do, you would have had no data service. You'd have to fail back or make it fail over to 3G. Well, we have dozen.
Oh, the horror.
Oh, the horror is right. But this morning we had some problems with our reporters getting live to air.
Okay. Well, that is a problem. No.
4G modems on their laptops stopped functioning. And the plan B was they have a 3G card and instructions also on the 4G card how to switch over to 3G. And that's what we did. So for us, it was uneventful on the air. The listener had no idea that the network was down and we were being, scrambling, so to speak. But, that's the kind of thing you have to do. You got to have a plan B. And when you're outside your comfort zone of your studio or maybe transmitter facility, plan Bs work very well, and sometimes plan C.
Speaking of Plan B, a man who has spent most of his life being Plan B, Tom Ray's here. Tom, what?
Hello. Sorry about that.
Did we catch you? Tom, I'm sorry. Did we catch you at a bad time? We can come back later.
Oh no. I'm fine. Station is on the air, so that's what counts. I'll have to check the other things in a few minutes. Anyway, no, we had Chris was talking about. Both Chris's kind of mentioned creatures or things that show up at the transmitter site. I used to take care of a set of stations down in St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, and matter of fact, built a couple of them. And on the FM station, the FM transmitter was on St. John. It was actually just about the middle of the island, and if you've ever been down there, there's not a heck of a lot on St. John. So we had a Harris FM transmitter. It was a dual platinum. So 10 kilowatts aside, that combined to 20 kilowatts to go up the pipe. And the center cabinet was where the exciters were, and it was where the remote control connections were. And, basically it was cold. I mean, it was low voltage in there, so, 24 volts or less. So you could work in the cabinet while the station was on the air. And we had the station on the air this one day, and we were finishing up some connections on the remote control. I'm up there with their chief engineer. And all of a sudden, we hear this knock on the door. Now, you have to picture this. The transmitter building is up on top of this hill. There's a road, literally, it was like this angle to get up there. Mm-hmm. So if you drove up that road and went behind the building, which is where you could park, from the road down the bottom, which I put in quotes because it was dirt. You could barely see the building. Never mind the car if you were parked behind it, and we were parked behind the building. So we're kind of looking at each other, going, "Who the hell's coming up here? In the middle of nowhere?" So
really? There's somebody knocking at the door here? Really?
Yeah, somebody pounding at the door. Yeah, it's like so. We open the door, and there's this guy standing there with his wife and his 2 kids. And he pulls out an ID. He was from the phone company. He worked in the microwave division. He says, I know the tower is up here. He says, and I saw your car, and we're sitting there looking at each other going, well, that's kind of bunk because you can't see the car from the road. But, he had some interesting questions, wanted to see the transmitter, and we actually spent about 45 minutes talking shop with the guy, and, he was talking microwave, but, he'd never seen anything this high power. And we had a very nice conversation. And he thanked us, and then they went to leave. And right before he walked out the door, he says, oh, by the way, he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out the Watchtower.
He
was a Jehovah's Witness.
Sounds like a darn good Jehovah's Witness if he's knocking on transmitter doors.
Oh, it was so we each gave him like $5, and he went on his way, and we made sure they were well out of earshot, and we were on the floor. It's like, oh my God, we're up here in the middle of nowhere.
Oh my goodness, that guy's dedicated. I mean, we need we need more people in the world dedicated like that to do their job, whatever it is.
Oh,
gee, that's a good story. Hey, that's a good story. And Mr. Tar, you had something that you wanted to add in, I think, didn't you?
No, but it actually dovetails. Speaking of Harris transmitters and exciters, I had a station that has been around for a while and they had some older transmitting equipment. To give you an idea of the age, the transmitter was a 20H3. So pretty old stuff. And it had been going along fine for years, and it was time to put in a new audio processor. Great, I mean, if they had an old Optima 8000, and I was excited to get something in there that was somewhat modern. So we bought your basic modern processor, which at the time I believe was an Optima 8200, something like that, the very first digital version of Orband's processor. And got it all wired up, turn it on, music starts playing, big old bass note, boom, transmitter shuts off.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
Interesting. Turn it back on again. Cruising along, bass note comes on, boom, transmitter comes back off again. Well, it turns out that as most of you have probably experienced, the exciter was an old Harris MS-15 that didn't have the dual lock PLL. So what happened is the bass notes would come through and unlock the PLL, or the AFC rather, and unlock the frequency of the exciter, which would cause the transmitter to trip.
I noticed in the chat room, the first guy with the right answer was Bill Sachs. He says AFC loop.
Yep, that's exactly what it was, the AFC loop. And, it would unlock the AFC loop and the transmitter would shut off. And it was the first case I've ever been dealt with where I actually had to go back to an older technology for a while. So I had to put the, I knew Bill would know that, Bill, Mr. Optimod, if anybody know that. But we actually had to go back to the Optima 8000 for a while, and
yes,
back in the day, you could actually, you could get a retrofit kit for the MS-15 that would upgrade that to what was called at that time the MX-15 that actually was able to do that. But you still see warnings if you look at the old manuals for those transmitters about anything with excessive bass in it could unlock the AFC on the exciter.
This is actually another good teachable moment, and we've chatted about it when we talked about when we had a show about FM modulation. But what Chris is talking about here is this really interesting design dichotomy with FM exciters. On the one hand, the whole nature of FM is we have this carrier frequency and we want to move it up and down the dial. So we move the frequency at the rate of the audio that's modulating it, right? Well, but the other goal here is that we want to keep the frequency coming out of the exciter averaged on whatever your frequency is. So let's say your station is 98.1 megahertz. Well, that carrier is supposed to be, averaging at 98.1, but we want to move it, up and down and up and down and up and down. And so there's a circuit in there, an automatic frequency control, AFC, that applies if this gets too far out of the way here, too far off 98.1, the AFC voltage pulls it back in. And there's a loop that it operates in to keep everything, copacetic and hunky-dory. Well, if a bass note comes along that is beyond the capability of the AFC loop to hold things together, we get this boom, we get this this excursion of the frequency, and then the AFC goes, I'm out of lock, I don't know what to do now. So when they started designing processors that could put through some really thumpy bass, they had to think about the design of FM exciters and make the AFC circuits a little bit more intelligent, like a dual speed AFC circuit. And nowadays they have completely digital exciters too that can reduce or eliminate this problem. But I've experienced that issue myself, especially with it seems back in the day, foreign made exciters seem to have that problem fairly often, but the better U.S. made ones, they got that problem solved. Well, Chris, I'm glad you got that fixed. I got a real quick story for you, then we got to go. If you want to obtain the rights to use some land in American Samoa to put your transmitter, at one point you had to talk to this guy. Let's see if I can get that focused. How's that looking? Yeah. That is Kirk Harnack in 1996, standing next to Samoan Chief Fuyamono.
I was going to say, the guy on the right looks great, but, you know.
I can tell you that I recognize the hair.
There you go. I had a lot of it. Here's another picture. Not only did you have to meet with Chief Fuyamono, you really had to meet with the whole family. And so there's my business partner, Larry Fuss, with the guy with losing his hair, and then there's the lady who I think was his daughter and then granddaughter. And the cottage that is behind us in the photo, there's a tomb in there. And when Larry and I first came to American Samoa, we saw all these tombs out in front of people's yards. We didn't know what was going on. And Larry made a joke. He says, they probably bury their grandma in the front yard. Well, we had a very pleasant Sunday morning breakfast with Chief Fuyamono, and he took us through his yard, and he's a very well-to-do Samoan. He was the first elected U.S. representative from American Samoa to the U.S. Congress. Didn't have voting rights, but I think he could introduce bills, or maybe he couldn't. I don't know. They can now. So he took us around the property and showed us where the chickens are and where the pigs are, and then Larry said, "Well, Chief, whose tomb is that in that building right there?" And there's another picture of the building, and the chief says very proudly, "Oh, that is my grandmother." So, well, that is who's buried out front. Well, it turns out the way Samoans, and I'm generalizing here, okay, so maybe I got the story a little bit wrong, but generally speaking, the way Samoans lay claim to the place where they live, because they can't buy property. They think the land is the land. And so they don't buy and sell property. It's in the family. But if you want to establish a home and call it yours, well, you just bury a relative out front. I mean, who's going to make you move, right? So
wow.
So we had to talk to Chief Fuyamono, and we we were told it'd be a real good idea if you went to church with him, and he'll be more likely to help you get that land. So Larry and I went to church with him, and on that Sunday morning, and had a great time. Terrific singers, and we ended up getting eventually the rights to rent the land. But that was tough to do. So that's my war story.
Who do you have buried in front of your transmitter building?
That's the problem. They can kick us off any time. We got nobody buried out front.
Well, I think it's time to sacrifice the program director.
All right. Well, I'll run that up the flagpole and see how it works. Guys, we are out of time. I've had a delightful time on this episode. Thanks very much for your stories and talking about the topical subject we had to talk about. I think a great subject for a show coming up, and I've got so many ideas. I just got to get these people scheduled and find folks to talk about it. Is this notion that which one of you? Tom talked earlier about combining two transmitters, right?
Yes.
These are two FM transmitters, right, Tom?
These were two FM, but you can do it with AM too.
You can. But it's not terribly uncommon to take two FM transmitters of a medium to large capability and combine their outputs for double the power and then send that up to the antenna. And there's some good reasons for doing it.
Transmitters too.
Yes, you can, absolutely. But there's also some interesting complications in getting that done and doing it right, because believe me, two transmitters don't want to look at each other, not directly. And so there's a way to combine them where neither transmitter is aware that the other one is there, and yet their power gets combined. And that's
kind of like
pretty
my marriage.
Oh, he'll be here all week, folks. Try the beef tips.
And don't forget to tip the wait staff. Thank you very much.
Hey, our show, episode 80 of This Week in Radio Tech, has been brought to you by the folks at Telos Systems and the new Zip 1 IP codec. It's pretty cool, and it's getting cooler, and it's shipping now, and I got one right here next to me. I've been tuning in, unbeknownst to them, I've been tuning in the KGO studios and the WCBS studios. They got them in their studios, so anyway. Check it out on the web. Go to telos-systems.com and click the button for the Zip 1. Thanks a lot. I appreciate Burke very much. And my co-host, partners in crime, thank you for being here. Tom Ray from the Hudson Valley of New York. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Sir Kirk. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks for having me.
And you can meet Tom Ray at W2TRR.com. Also,
that's right.
Chris Tobin, the best-dressed engineer in radio from Manhattan, New York. He's at CBS Radio. Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome, Kirk. Hey, by the way, just one thing about the patents we talked about earlier with automation litigation. Anybody know about the multimedia time warping system? It's a patent. I'm serious. You use it probably at home. TiVo. DVRs. Wow. It's a multimedia time warping system.
Time warping system.
That's what I'm reading it off the U.S. patent site right now.
Oh,
so if you think this litigation is goofy, go talk about a time warping system for your TV programs.
You know, these people who litigate this stuff, you just want to say, look, just go invent something if you could.
Yeah.
The opinions expressed here are those of the participants, and not necessarily those of their employers or wives. And also Chris Tarr from Mukwonago, Wisconsin. Thanks for being here, Chris. Appreciate you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And you are at the geekjedi.com.
That's correct, sir.
All right. We'll see you there. Hey, thanks for joining us, and thanks to Burke, and we will see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.